we can go ahead and get started. I just turned recording on, so Heather, Cassie, sorry I missed our introductions, but hello everyone. We're excited that you're here. Today we're going to be talking about job interviews, and we've broken it down into a couple of different parts. So we're going to be talking about what you should be doing prior to the interview. There we go. So some of the prep work you should be doing prior to the interview, some things to do and not to do during the interview, and then just what it looks like post-interview, just some best practices and kind of how to go about navigating that period of time between after the interview and before you hear back. And then of course, we'll be taking any questions and answering anything that you're wondering about. So thanks for being here. We'll go ahead and get into it. We've got a quick video that we were going to share with you all. So let me know if everyone's able to hear it. So here we go.
Ruben, I'm not sure about anybody else, but I can't hear the video. I can see it, but I can't hear it.
Sorry about that, everyone. Let me see if I can. Like it wasn't playing at all, the audio? Or it was faint?
Right. When you share your screen, I think there's a little button you have to click in order to share the sound. I don't know why that's not a default, but you might have to stop sharing and then reshare.
Sorry, everyone. 1 second.
It happens to me all the time.
If we can't get it, Ruben, we can just skip it. I know we have another video later
on. Give me 1 minute. Yeah, I'm not seeing. Yeah, it looks like I have everything on my end.
Okay,
I thought.
don't worry about it, Ruben. We can go on to the next slide.
Sorry about that.
Okay. So like I said, everyone, hi, my name's Cassie. Like Heather and Ruben, I've also sat in on a lot of interviews, been on interviewing committees, especially student interviews, especially in my time with orientation and family programs, a lot of interviews. And so I really hope that you guys get some good tidbits and tips from this, and just kind of wanted to share some things that I've learned throughout this process. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the pre-interview prep work. And so you get an interview with the company, you're really excited. One of the first things you want to do is go onto their website or social media and review what they have going on at the moment. So you want to review their mission, vision, and goals. What does this company stand for? What's really important to them? What are kind of some current projects they have going on right now? Any upcoming projects? Any really kind of like landmarks or specific recognitions they've gotten. So you really kind of want to verse yourself on the company, which you probably did a little bit of before even applying. But you definitely want to make sure and do kind of a further dig before you go to the interview on what's going on with that company and the culture at the moment. You also want to make sure if they have it available to review any staff. This may be a really good precursor to seeing who's going to be interviewing you, depending on what position you applied for, maybe what department, who may be your supervisor, or who you may be working with more closely. Maybe you want to jot down their names. And so you really want to make sure that you just kind of take some time and review the company before you go in for the interview. We're going to talk a little bit more about it later with Heather, but prepare a set of questions to ask. And so as you're reviewing the website, questions may already pop up. And so you just kind of want to jot those down. It really shows that you're interested in the company for the long term by asking specific questions that it's obvious that you've taken the time to kind of review the materials and go through. You want to make it seem like it's not just you Googled interview questions. You want to make it a little bit more catered and specific to this specific company and perhaps your position. So just make sure that you do all your research. I know that for interviews that I've gone on in, or not even interviews, like presentations or what have you, I always get a little surge of confidence knowing that I've reviewed, I know what's going on, instead of just kind of going in blindly. And so you really want to make sure that you do that. And again, it'll really kind of help your confidence as you go into the interview, I feel. Next slide. So looking the part. So again, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about this, but it should be self-explanatory to dress professionally. I think business casual is always the way to go. You want to ensure that jewelry and accessories are at a minimum, just so they're not a distraction. You also want to bring some type of folder, portfolio, something to write on. So again, bring those questions that you have written down. They're probably going to be talking about items that you want to remember and jot down. You might want to write down again who is in your interview, because you might want to do a thank you email, and we're going to talk about that later as well. For me, I also, as you can probably see, talk a lot with my hands. And so for me, it's almost like a comfort thing as well, just to like have my pen there. So my hands are a little bit and my arms are a little under control, because it can be distracting when someone's kind of like wailing around while they're talking. So for me, that's kind of like a comfort thing to have, like a pen, paper, something to kind of control myself. And again, they might ask for your resume. So you want to bring extra copies of your resume just in case. And again, you can kind of put that in your portfolio. You want to plan your arrival. I have a little bit of like OCD and major anxiety when it comes to like being late. So this is always something that I worry about. I mean, back in my day, you had to like print out a MapQuest map and then hope that you don't get lost. But I know now there's lots of ways that you find the routes, the quickest ones, if there's traffic, if anything's closed down. So really kind of do your research and make sure you know where you're going, your drive time and everything like that. You want to make sure that you arrive early enough to find parking, find and walk to the office. I know, like for me, I'm in the higher ed field, so interviews are mostly on campuses. And I'm sure everyone who's been on a college campus knows that there's tons of, well, there's no parking, and then you can't really find a parking lot that you can park in, and then you have to walk, and then it's in this building, it's on the second floor of this building. So it's like a big process. That might not be the case for you, but you just want to make sure, again, to ease nerves and anxiety, that you know where you're going before the interview. If virtual, make sure you have your link ready. Internet is steady. Again, I'm sure we've all been in a virtual world for a long time now. And so this should all be kind of common sense. But I know I was presenting a workshop a few months ago, and I was trying to log in to start it, and my Zoom wouldn't start. I needed to log in again. The credentials weren't working. And I was like, oh my God. So just make sure that everything is working. Everything is set before your interview. So your arrival. So You got the directions, you know where you're going, you're ready. You want to make sure that you arrive no more than 10 minutes early. I've had some interviews get there 30 minutes early, 45 minutes early, and it's just always a little bit awkward. And then you feel kind of rushed. You're like, should we start it early? Some people who are going to be in the interview may not even be there yet. So then like they walk through the lobby and you're there, and or maybe like they haven't finished the interview right before you. And so then that's kind of, you see them coming in. So I would just make sure that you're not there earlier than 10 minutes. You know, sometimes what I've done before is I get there early again to make sure that I know where everything is. Okay, cool, there's the office. I'm gonna go get coffee, or I'm gonna go wait around on campus or do something else, and just go back when my interview is kind of close to time. If you're virtual, you want to log on to the link no more than 5 minutes early. Again, you just don't want to add any extra rush or anything like that to the presenters or to those who are interviewing you. So I think 10 minutes in person, 5 minutes virtually is kind of a good cushion. And then just take note that the interview really begins the second you walk into the lobby. So again, I've had students who've come into interviews who were like overly familiar with the receptionist, maybe rude to the receptionist in the front staff area, rude to other people who are in the lobby, and that really affects their outcome and results, because we all talk, you know, and so you just want to make sure that you don't engage in anything beyond cordial pleasantries with the front staff. They don't need to know like the details of your weekend or like the strained relationship you have with your boyfriend. Like they are just there to be there. So just make sure that you keep it really cordial. And again, your interview really starts the second you walk in. I think we have a video next. It may not be working, which is fine. So we'll just kind of move over. I think Heather is going to be talking about what to do and what not to
Let me
do.
see if it. Oh. Cassie, did you say you want to keep? Okay, sorry about
Yeah, no
the.
worries. It was a clip from The Office. I don't know if people still watch The Office anymore, but it was just Dwight and just being like overly confident in the interview, like smug, cocky, answering questions that they didn't even ask. And so, you know, Heather will talk about this, but just making sure that you're confident, you know what you're talking about, but you do not come off as arrogant, which is a fine line. So I'm sure Heather will get into that. And like I said, she's going to talk about some do's and don'ts.
And we are sending out the slides afterwards, so all the videos and stuff will be on there. So just sorry again about the difficulty today.
I think that's one thing that we all do have in common, right? Is technical difficulties when we least want them or expect them. But yeah. So let me ask a question real quick, though. Cassie brought up some really good points in terms of things that you can do to prepare. Raise your hand, use the reaction, thumbs up, or just unmute yourself and say, yes, that's me. If you have ever gone and done some actual research on a company or a campus department that you interviewed for or that you were getting ready to interview for, who's actually gone and done their research to find out more about the job that you are applying and interviewing for? Parths, I see your thumbs up. Okay, great. Okay, so again, if you haven't, it's a good tip, right? It's good to really do that research and do your homework. It could give you a step up above other candidates because you show that you've got that interest. You've done your homework, so don't underestimate the power of that step of just doing a little bit of research on the companies. Or again, even if it's a campus job, if it's a campus job, it's still your first kind of step toward that professional environment. So you definitely want to start practicing these things now. Don't ever underestimate yourself or the experience you have working on campus. It's a great opportunity to prepare yourself for that full immersion into the professional world after you graduate. So you've prepared, you've gotten to the interview on time or early, you're ready for this interview. Let's talk about some do's and don'ts during the interview. The first thing that most sources will talk about is your nonverbal behavior, the way you carry yourself, your body language. That's really important. So a few points with regard to that, with your nonverbal behavior and how you're communicating with your body language. The first would be to maintain good eye contact with the people that you're interviewing with. And that can be difficult. It can be difficult if you don't have a lot of experience interviewing, if you're a little nervous. And sometimes too, just culturally, there are differences in the level of eye contact we maintain. And so just keep in mind that that's something that is important to consider, because you do want to come into an interview and you want your body language, you want that nonverbal communication to be open and genuine. And one way to do that is to maintain appropriate eye contact, right? You don't want to stare somebody down the entire interview, but you want to make sure that you make that contact with them. When you think about your posture, how you're sitting, whether you're at a desk in person or in a conference room or virtual, you want to consider your body language and the posture. And are you being open? Are you showing that you do have that confidence that you're bringing into the interview? So just again, just things to consider, that when the people that are interviewing you are going to be seeing everything, right? They're not just going to be listening to the words you say. They're going to be watching how you interact with them and move in that environment. So in addition to eye contact and your posture, be genuine and smile. You definitely want to be open and friendly, because these people are going to be making the judgment call on whether or not they want to work with you on a regular basis. So you might want to consider just practicing some of this stuff before you go into that interview. Just taking a quick assessment before you head in and reminding yourself about these things. How can I walk into this room without even saying a word, communicating to this group of people that I am somebody that they want to hire? A note about virtual interviews, because we are still very much in this kind of hybrid environment, right? You may see that more people are doing in-person interviews, but also interviews are conducted virtually still. Just keep in mind that if you are at home on your computer doing a virtual interview, all of those things that I mentioned still apply. The good eye contact, your good posture, your open body language, being genuine. Remember to keep your camera on. Cassie mentioned making sure that you troubleshoot your technology. Make sure you have a steady internet connection. Make sure that your Zoom or whatever platform you're using is working well. Try to minimize distractions, things like that. Understand that, just like we're experiencing today, sometimes things will happen and you'll have to troubleshoot during the interview, but you want to do what you can to minimize those things. And one of those things is keeping your camera on. I will say, even in workshops like this, it's much more engaging when somebody is talking to actual faces and not just names in blank boxes. But it's even more important when you are interviewing. You definitely want them to be able to see your face, see your expressions. Be aware of your background also. You might want to use a virtual background or just blur your background, because if you're at home, the only space you might have for a private, some private quiet space is your bedroom. If so, make sure that you don't have a messy bed behind you, right? Just keep in mind that the people who are interviewing you will be able to see your background. So keep it neat and clean, or use some sort of a virtual background to blur, or just make sure that it's not distracting and that it's appropriate for that context. And also, like Cassie said, you want to dress and you want to arrive for a virtual interview the same way you would an in-person one. Make sure you're dressing for the part, make sure you're on a little early so you can troubleshoot, and just be really prepared. I think sometimes when we're sitting in front of our computer and we're in this virtual world, we tend to relax a little bit when it comes to just making sure that we're really putting forward that our best foot forward and our best face forward. So keep in mind, virtual is just as important as in person. Some things to keep in mind not to do. Hopefully these go without saying, but we're going to say them anyway. When you're in an interview, don't slump, don't hunch over, remember to be alert and awake. Don't chew gum or have, if you have a breath mint in your mouth before an interview, that's perfectly fine. Try to finish it or spit it out before you get into the interview. Try not to fidget. Cassie mentioned she talks with her hands a lot. I'm the same way. So if it helps to have a pen or even a paper clip or something to keep your hands busy, try not to fidget. Don't yawn or look bored. Stay engaged. And really importantly, don't have your phone out. You definitely want to keep your phone on silent, packed away somewhere where it's not going to be a distraction for you. Yes, and like Cassie just mentioned in the chat, we hope this goes without saying, but the reason we're talking about these things is because we've all been in hiring committees where we've experienced this in interviews. So, and it's one of those things too, that it goes without saying until sometimes you're right there in the moment and you may not think about it. So just keep these things in mind. Stay engaged and don't look bored. Get some good sleep so you're not tired and so you're not yawning as well. Again, for the virtual interviews, don't lie in bed, don't walk around, please don't drive while you're in an interview. These are all things that you probably shouldn't be doing anyway if you're in any kind of virtual setting. Don't be distracted, right? Just remember that you need to be present and engaged, whether you're in person or online. During interviews, obviously a big part of the process is being asked questions. So just some things to keep in mind when you are on the receiving end of questions. Do answer those questions carefully. It is okay to ask for clarification. It's okay to ask them to repeat the question. If you're not sure you understand how it was asked, go ahead and ask for that clarification. Do take notes. It's okay to take notes. And jot down the questions to help you remember. Sometimes you'll be asked questions that are multiple parts. And again, it's perfectly acceptable to jot down notes so that you can keep track, so you make sure you answer the whole question. And it's okay to ask for clarification. Also, make sure that you answer the question. I've heard often, and that's something that I look for also from anybody that I'm interviewing, it's a good idea to kind of tell your story as you answer. You answer a question, you want to tie your answers into your experience and your talents and your strengths. But it's easy to get involved in telling the story and never what we call land the plane, right? So you definitely want to make sure that as you're telling your story, as you're giving explanation, you're not losing track and getting off on some kind of tangent. So make sure that you are answering the question and that you're getting to the point. And you also want to be really truthful as you answer questions. Admit to things that you don't know, because if you lie during an interview, the truth will come out, especially if you're hired, right? So be truthful, admit to things that you don't know, but also find a way to focus on your strengths, find a way to bring things back to what you do have to offer, the information that you do have. So again, it's just really important to maintain your integrity in an interview as well, and make sure that you're being honest and truthful and to the point. Some things that we've seen, right, when it comes to answering questions. So don't be too repetitive. There are some things that we tend to hear from time to time over and over again. So for instance, don't say that's a great question after every question. That gets a little old from time to, hearing that over and over. So try not to be too repetitive, especially with catchphrases. Don't talk too much. Like I mentioned earlier, stick to the point and be concise with your answers. It's okay to tell a story. It's okay to give some background information, but land that plane, get to the point. So again, not getting on tangents or going down rabbit trails, just really sticking to the point of the question. And this is where taking notes could help. If you're taking notes as those questions are being asked, that can help you stick to the point, right? So also, a lot of times you're at the beginning of an interview, you're given an opportunity to introduce yourself and give a little bit of background about yourself. This is where you want to keep it concise also. You don't need to give your whole life story, just keep it brief. And when it comes to personal information, keep that limited and try to keep it relevant to the strengths and the talents that you're bringing to this interview. So those are a few things to keep in mind of what not to do. Also, usually, generally toward the end of an interview, you are given an opportunity to ask questions of those interviewers. Take advantage of this. I will say it can be disappointing when I'm in a hiring committee, I'm on a board interviewing people. If they don't have any questions, then it makes me wonder, how invested are they in this job? How interested are they really in learning more about this job? So like Cassie said, when you're doing your prep work, prep some questions you want to ask, and you need to prep those questions based on the homework that you've done on the company or the department that you want to work for. So generally you can ask questions throughout, but you might want to have, like we said, have that list of questions to ask at the end. Have those questions written down and be prepared to ask those questions. And a couple of things to keep in mind, I think, Ruben, if you'll just do one more. Yeah. This opportunity, when they ask you if you have questions, this is your chance to assess this organization, to see if this is a place that you really want to work. Because not only are you being interviewed, you are doing some interviewing of this company, this corporation, this department as well. So ask questions that are going to give you some insight into that. And this is also the opportunity for you to demonstrate that you're the best person for the job. You sometimes just the questions that you ask and the way you ask them will help these people on this hiring committee to understand that you really are the best person for the job and they want to hire you. So that being said, let's run through just a few types of questions that are better to ask. So these again are questions that show that you've done your homework about the company, about its missions, or its mission and its core values. So just like Ruben's putting up on the screen, what are the most important goals for this company? How does this team work to support those goals? Ask them, is there anything I can clarify about my qualifications? Or what type of skill is this team missing that you're looking to fill with a new hire? You can tell that these are those types of questions that show that you're really interested and you've really done your homework. Some questions to avoid, the typically overused questions. So instead of asking, so what's a day in the life of somebody that works at this company, you could ask, there should be a bubble that will pop up, Ruben, sorry. There you go. So instead of what's a day in the life, you could ask, what are the daily responsibilities of this role? Instead of asking, what's your favorite thing about working here? You might consider asking, what gets you excited about this company's future? So again, sometimes just something a little out of the ordinary is helpful to ask. And then remember to avoid questions about salary or benefits especially in this first interview. That's something that can be negotiated later if an offer is made, or if you're called in for a second or a third interview. And typically, if it's a full-time position, typically a benefits package is shared when they make an offer as well. So you really want to avoid asking those types of questions, especially at your first interview. And then Cassie, I think this was a student of yours. Did you want to share this information about this slide? These are just some tips from a successful student.
Yeah, so this is one of our student workers in the Co-ed Student Success Center. Her name is Mally, and she is going to start her student teaching in the fall. And they recently had an opportunity where you could essentially get paid while you're doing your student teaching, which is not something that the college really does for everybody. You obviously have to interview for it, and they don't select that many people. And Mally was selected, so she was really excited, and it was really timely because it was around the time that Ruben, Heather, and I were working on this workshop. And so I asked her to just kind of share a little bit of, some tips and what she did that was successful. As you can see here, we talk about body language, which Heather talked about, making sure that you have good eye contact, good body language, asking questions, making sure you answer all their questions, and having a set of questions prepared. And again, being confident. And so I think ways to be confident, again, is to make sure that you have your questions ready, you know where you're going, you've done your research on the company or whoever it is you're interviewing with. So a lot of these things we've already talked about, and obviously Mally used them and she was successful. And so just kind of want to share a little student piece about Mally, because we're really proud of her.
Thanks so much. Okay, finally, one last do and a couple of final don'ts. So do be friendly. Again, this is your chance to make a first impression and to show this hiring committee, what a wonderful person you are to be around and work with. So do be friendly. However, there's a line that you don't want to cross. Don't be overly familiar. Keep your conversation and questions and discussion appropriate. And even if you know one or more of the interviewers, you definitely want to maintain that professional posture and just kind of your composure. You definitely don't want to walk into an interview, especially if you know somebody in that interview, assuming that because you know them, you're going to get the job, right? You still need to apply an interview just like anybody else. So do be friendly, but don't be overly familiar during this interview process. And something that we all wanted to talk about is ghosting, right? So don't ghost your interview. What do we mean by that? Let's say you've applied for several different positions, several different jobs, and you've got a couple of interviews lined up. That's pretty common. It's common to have 2 or 3 interviews scheduled. And you decide, maybe you interview for one and they offer you the position before you have a chance to interview for the other one or the other 2, and you decide to take that offer. Please don't just not show for those interviews. Do the professional courtesy of calling and letting them know that you've accepted another position and so you're not available, and cancel that interview. Keep in mind that it's just professional courtesy, and that's these people's time and efforts and resources that they've set aside. So don't just not show for that interview. Another thing to keep in mind would be, not just interviewing for the practice of it. If you decide that this is not something you want to pursue for whatever reason, again, just show the professional courtesy of calling or emailing and letting them know and canceling that interview, because then that will open up that interview slot for somebody who does need that job, who does want to apply for it. So I will just say that's one of the things that has surprised me the most and disappointed me the most when I've been on the hiring committee, is for us to all be ready and to be there for the interview time and just wait and the person just doesn't show. So Ruben, Cassie, if you have anything to add to that, we felt that was important to just note at this time.
I think Heather said it really well. Even though you've accepted maybe position somewhere else, or you've realized this isn't for me. I know sometimes like, oh, well, I'm just gonna practice. It's good interview practice. Well, being on the other side of it, it's like, it's a waste of the person's time. So just be courteous and let them know that you're no longer interested in the position, or you appreciate their time, but you're removing yourself from the running. And again, that could open up the spot for someone else.
Absolutely. And that kind of ties along with what I was gonna talk about, just to kind of wrap up. If the slides would transition for me, there we go. Yeah, so I was just gonna, to close out, talk a little bit about what to do after the interview and what that portion of time afterwards looks like. And that's definitely part of it. So just being considerate of the people that interviewed you. If you are interviewing at a couple of different places, as Heather and Cassie were talking about, just being courteous with their time as well, and making sure to follow up if anything has changed or after circumstances have changed. So to start off with, I wanted to talk about that period kind of immediately after the interview. So in the wrap up and whatever the final interview looked like, make sure that you get a clear timeline from the interviewer. This is one of the more common questions that I get from students that I talk to when they're talking about their job search is how long should I wait before following up? How long should I wait before I hear anything? And it really just varies from company to company, person to person, and a variety of factors can play into it. I have been on a search committee where my supervisor had a family situation that she had to kind of leave and take care of, and that delayed, unfortunately, like the interview process that we had been running through. So that delayed like people hearing a little bit from us. I work a lot with engineering students, so sometimes there's like big projects, kind of like all hands on deck type things, and that can come up and delay things. So you really never know, but as best as possible, make sure that you get a clear timeline from the interviewer and follow up within that period of time. If they say you should expect to hear something back within the next 2 weeks, if it's been more than 2 weeks, just send a quick follow-up, reminding them, because they interview a lot of people, just remind yourself, hey, this is Ruben, we spoke on this date. Just wanted to reiterate that I really enjoyed my time with you all and just wanted to see if there were any updates regarding my candidacy or something along those lines, just to follow up. Also send a thank you letter. So this is something that is, I get a lot of questions about this too. So kind of the way I think about it is that it's never, it's good form, and it's good form and good manners and courteous to do. And it also, if it's between you and one other candidate, it's not the biggest difference maker, but it is something that kind of stays in people's minds. Like I kind of make note when I'm on a search committee that somebody sent a thank you letter, just like, oh, that was a nice thing to do. And it's probably not going to be the sole reason that they hire you, but it is another way to just like kind of keep yourself fresh in their memories. So I always recommend doing it. And along with that, sometimes I'm in interviews where there's a lot of people and I am not good with names and things like that. So I just like kind of jot down who everyone I spoke with is and make sure I got their correct job title and everything, and make sure that I send the follow-ups to the appropriate people. And then this last bullet point, going along with what I was talking about initially, don't panic if it's been a little bit since you've heard anything, or if it's been a little bit longer than when they told you would hear back from, just because again, a variety of things can come up, and it could just be something completely out of your control. So just follow up within the appropriate timeline, and don't try not to worry about it too much, essentially. And then this is like kind of after a little bit of time has passed from the interview, unwind, do something nice for yourself, just to kind of like relax afterwards. It can be, if you do everything we're talking about, you did a lot of legwork in the preparation for the interview, and just kind of decompress and just kind of take a good look at how you feel like you did and how you feel like it went. I put this bullet point, some additional research. Maybe something came up in the interview that you weren't completely sure about. Maybe it was something about the company or something regarding a certain, I don't know, software or like projects that maybe you didn't know as much about. Just it can help to do a little bit of research just in case like there's any follow-up questions about it later. And then another good tip, and something that I've gotten into the habit of doing, is writing down all of the questions from the interview and kind of writing out your responses as you had written them down and workshopping them a little bit. As we were talking about just a little while ago, it's likely that you're going to be interviewing for several jobs. So you can kind of use this after you've done the interview. You can use it as a way to kind of sharpen your skills and assess yourself and see where you're at. Because also, especially in terms of like behavioral interview questions, a lot of those are probably going to come up in other interviews. So you can always kind of practice on your answers and responses to those. And then these are two different, you're either going to get it or you're not going to get it. So if you don't get it, it's okay. Be gracious to yourself. There's just, you can only control what you can control, right? So you can only control the level of preparation that you did and how you responded and things like that. And sometimes it's just, they had a ton of applicants and somebody was just like 0.5% more efficient in like some skill that they needed. And there's really nothing that you could have done about that. So I always just tell people that like it's just a process, and it can potentially be a long process. but just be kind to yourself and just kind of, decompress and take a look at maybe where you could have improved. But sometimes it is just something that was completely out of your control, and you just kind of have to keep at it and keep applying and keep looking. And then related to that, ask for feedback from the interviewer. The worst they can do is say like no, and they can't really do that. But if you're working with a recruiter, they may be able to provide you with some insight about like maybe something that you could have improved upon, and that's just going to help you in the long run. So it never hurts just to at least ask for that, I always say. And then I always say, even if you didn't get the job, to go ahead and connect. If you feel like you made a connection with somebody during the interview, look them up on LinkedIn and just kind of stay in contact, because I've heard a number of stories where somebody didn't get a job at a certain company the first time around, but maybe something comes open 6 months later that you also feel like you might be a good fit for. So don't burn that bridge. Don't just say like, oh, whatever, they didn't hire me, like I'm not even gonna. Just kind of build that bridge and maintain that connection, because you really never know where it can lead to later. So, and then if you do get it, congratulations, celebrate, do something nice for yourself, get ready for the job, and be excited about it, but also negotiate. Heather talked about that a little bit in one of the previous slides, but that's something you can negotiate of a variety of things. And quick plug, we're going to have a full session about salary negotiation. I think it's in 2 weeks. We have a slide coming up that has like all the dates for the upcoming sessions, but come learn more about how to go about doing that and what that typically looks like. So, and then we're kind of just at the question portion. We have a little bit of time left. So Cassie, Heather, is there anywhere else that you all wanted to jump to first, or want to get into questions?
I think for me, we're ready for questions. We'd love to hear some questions from y'all. And if not, if y'all are down for it, we do have a quick little Kahoot to do to review. But yeah, what are your questions? Oh, Alicia's raised her hand.
Yes, I have a question. How do you guys will say to approach like group interviews? Because now they are more people. I've gone to companies and they have done like group interviews. Do you guys have any pointers or any recommendations regarding group interviews?
I do not. I've never sat in on a group interview. I don't know, Ruben and Heather, have you guys?
I have a little bit of experience with it, and I would say all of this still translates. So make sure to follow just like the advice that was still given. But I would say one thing just regarding the mindset in the group interviews. Part of what they are assessing in that is your ability to like work as part of a team and collaborate with people. So don't, even though you all are interviewing for the same job, try not to think of it like as a competition, because what they're looking for is just how you are going to interact in a group setting with people. So be kind and courteous with the other people that you're interviewing with. Maintain like positive body language. So if somebody has a good answer to something, remain engaged, like nodding, making sure you're listening, paying attention. And then otherwise just kind of maintaining that connection. And I would say even like remain connected with, if you meet the other people that were there for the interview, kind of maintaining contact with them as well, because that could also be additional people for your network. Presumably you all are probably looking at the same industry, same types of jobs. So kind of establish those connections as well, I would say.
Okay, thank you.
I would say emails are acceptable. I've gotten a few thank you emails after interviews. I don't know, Heather or Cassie, if you all feel differently, but I would say that's customary, especially in this day and age.
I agree. I think for me, either or, and emails are often a quicker way for for the recipients to receive that thank you. Because if you try to mail it, sometimes it takes a while, especially on a college campus, right? It can take a while to actually get to the people. So either or, in my experience. What other questions do y'all have?
I would just add, not really a question, but sometimes it can be difficult when you're interviewing for a lot of places and you're not getting that call back or you're not getting selected. And it's really sometimes, as weird as it sounds, not about you. It could be that that employer already had somebody in mind. They had an internal candidate. Like Ruben was saying, it's like there was another person who maybe just personality wise fit in better with the company, and it really had nothing to do with your credentials or what you're capable of doing. They obviously know you're capable of doing it, or else they would have, they wouldn't have called upon you to interview. So I know that I was joking with Ruben. It's like, if I don't, like one time I didn't get an interview, I didn't get a job, and I'm like, why wouldn't they want me? So it really just depends on, a lot of factors, and it's hard sometimes to not take it personal, but just try your best, because there's a lot of factors that go into it, and sometimes it really has nothing to do with you or your abilities.
Yeah, and kind of following up on that, I would say, honestly, just getting to the interview can sometimes be the most difficult part. So if they're calling you, and some of these jobs, they literally have like hundreds of people applying. So if they're calling you for an interview, they already like you. Like, you've made it through probably the most difficult part of just like getting in front of a human that wants to talk to you. So I always try to encourage people to like take that and be at ease about it. You definitely still want to prepare and do everything that we talked about, but just getting to that part can be so challenging. And just, so feel good about that, feel encouraged about that.
I think something we didn't talk about is when employers or companies have multiple rounds of interviews. My husband, he got a job last year and he had 6 rounds of interviews. And I think that that's a lot, that's excessive. I think probably by like the 4th one, we were like, okay, I think you have the job. You're just at this point meeting a bunch of different people. But just be mindful that you will potentially have up to 3 rounds. I don't think I've ever gone further than 2 or 3 rounds for a position, but that's also very normal. And of course, that's a good sign. If you get called back, I think in that case, you want to just make sure that you diversify your answers. You don't always keep alluding to, as I said in my previous, you want to make sure that you bring new material, new items for them to kind of critique and discuss about. So that's something we didn't talk about, but again, pretty self-explanatory. If you're getting called back for multiple interviews, that's a good sign. Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to follow up too, just to kind of echo what Ruben and Cassie have said also. Getting to the interview is an important step, and it's a good thing. And a lot of times it's a numbers game, right? You have to you can't expect to receive a job just by going to one interview. But one thing that I've always tried to keep in mind myself personally is that things are going to work out. I have gone to interviews for jobs that I really wanted. I thought I was the best qualified candidate and didn't get that job and was disappointed. But then the job I ended up getting ended up being a great fit for me, and I ended up growing professionally, right? So just keep in mind, things are going to work out. Things are going to work out the way they're supposed to. That's my personal philosophy anyway. So it's okay to be disappointed if you don't get the interview, that you don't get the job when you thought the interview went great and you feel like you're the most qualified candidate. If you don't get that job, it's okay. It's going to work out anyway. You just have to keep pressing forward. And like we've said, not take it personally, because there's so many factors involved.
I think also listen to your gut. So I know when I was interviewing for jobs way out of undergrad, there was one interview and I don't know, I had like an icky feeling throughout the whole thing. I just was like, I don't think this is a good fit for me. I'm not getting good vibes. And what I should have done is after the interview, withdrew myself from the process and said that, I'm not going to move forward, what we discussed. And they offered me the position. So then I had to like be awkward and decline it and all this stuff. So listen to your gut for sure. I mean, I was like 22 at the time, but I knew at the point, like, this is not for me. So, like Heather said, you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. Mhm.
Absolutely. What other questions? Do we have any suggestions on how to anticipate what interview questions might be outside of prepared? That's a good question. I would say I'll include this in afterwards. We'll send out like the recording and the slides and stuff. I have just kind of like a general behavioral interview question list that's pretty standard, I would say, to like what a lot of interview questions typically deal with. So it's helpful just to kind of have those as a template. But for some, so I don't know everyone's backgrounds in the meeting today, but if you're interviewing at like a tech company or an engineering company, there may be like a technical interview portion that's more like working through some type of coding or kind of seeing how you assess a project or something like that. That can be a little bit more challenging to prepare for, but I would say just do some looking about like technical interviews if that is something that you're expecting. I would also say, so there are some sites that might be helpful. There's a couple of different things you can do. So I always encourage everyone to have a strong presence on LinkedIn and try to, as best as possible, network with people within like industries and companies that you might be interested in. And that's a good resource. So if you know somebody that's already at that company, or if you can find somebody that's there and just kind of ask them like, what's something that they asked you, like what's something that I should prepare for, that's a good way to go about it. There's also, I don't know if people are familiar with a website called Glassdoor, but essentially it's a site for people to like kind of review and post information about the companies that they work at. And sometimes there's a little bit of insight about interviews there and just like maybe some things to expect. So I would start with those places as a resource and then just practice like behavioral interviewing questions. And then we also, in regards to like technical interviews, look for things on campus that are happening kind of around that. So we've actually hosted with Google, they did like a technical interview workshop one time where they had one of their engineers lead students through what one of their like interview problems, one of what the coding things that they have people work on in interviews looks like. And that's of course like very specific to them, but we've had other companies offer to do that in the past. So just look to see if something like that is going on, because that's a good way to practice about it as well. I don't know if other people. Oh.
I think a good also rule of thumb is like a lot of times, again, like Ruben said, it depends on the type of interview and employer. They're going to want to see how you maybe work in groups. So that could be, or how you work on a team. So that could be a question that you can anticipate. They might want to see how you handle multiple projects at a time. So like how you handle working under stress. That could be a question that they ask. They want to see maybe that you have like overcome something. So like what was, I know a lot of times it's like, what was something, a project or event that didn't go as planned and how did you adjust? So kind of your flexibility. So if you kind of just think of general good characteristics of an employer, holding a job, things that happen at a job, that might be helpful. I don't know if Heather has anything to add, but.
I really don't have anything to add. I think that's all really good advice. And
like I mentioned, that is that list of behavioral interview questions, and I can include that in like the resources that we send out afterwards. We've got just a few minutes. Do we still want to do the Kahoot? Sorry, we got into like talking.
Oh no, that's good. I think the Kahoot was there in case we needed it. I think one thing I'd love to see from everybody who participated today is if you can just put in the chat, what's one tip that you learned today that you plan to implement for your next interview? What's one thing that you heard today that was maybe new or just reinforced something and you plan to implement it?
And while you're thinking about that, just quick plug for the workshops that we have left for the rest of the summer. Next week, we're going to be talking about job searching. It can be challenging, and just like sometimes searching for a job can be a job in and of itself. So we're going to be talking about kind of how to effectively, what sites to use, where to be looking, and just how to go about looking for that right fit, that right job for you. Yeah, that's great, Alicia. Taking notes during the interview, that's really good. Absolutely.
Anyone else have a tip to share that you're, oh, there we go, Brian. Thank you letters.
Thank
Great.
you, letters. Yeah, that's important. We've got here some different like articles and resources that we used for the presentation. I'll include, so we're going to send out the slides afterwards to everybody who attended today, and we'll include that, as well as the Career Center actually has some pretty helpful resources as well around interviews. There's a platform they use that you can do essentially like a practice interview and have like get some feedback on like your body language and things of that nature. So we'll be sure to include that as well. Oh, that was it. So any final questions or notes from Heather or Cassie?
Not for me, just thank you everybody for being here. We appreciate the time you've put into learning more about how to interview.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all so much for coming. Hope everyone has a great rest of the day. We'll send out the recording a little bit later this afternoon.
Mhm.